Yeah, we're live. Hi, guys.
Believe it was their birthright. I'm Justin Fall, and you're watching End Times Productions. Antarctica is a mystery in itself. We still don't fully understand Antarctica, but in 1537, a map shows up called the Perry Reese map, and there's no ice on Antarctica. So in the 1500s, if this was an accurate representation, Antarctica was not underneath ice. And that's not
Hey, Dolly, good to see you.
when you consider the history of the world. 1537, Perry Reese map, pretty fascinating little. What brought the ice? I don't know. Was the ice there to keep people out? Was the ice somehow created by whatever forces are residing there? I don't know. But what we know is that there's ice there now, and it's such a harsh climate. It's like the harshest climate in the world. You're talking about some of the craziest winter temperatures and also being a dry environment. The Nazis went there fully prepared. And according to General Dönitz, during the war, he gave an interview saying specifically that in case things took a turn for the worse, they already had a backup plan because they had already established a fortress within the ice. Now, that was a direct reference to what is called Base 211. So the Nazis go down there. It's very likely that they went ahead and established Base 211 in that initial expedition in 1938. Which, again, if the Nazis had not been successful in going down there and setting up shop, it's likely that World War II never would have happened. It's funny how the mainstream modern world tries to tell all these reasons for World War II while totally ignoring all the.
I read a book on Hitler's economic success, and the truth of the matter is, he didn't want to go to war as early as they wanted him to. They just wanted their money back. If they would have let him do it at his time, he would have probably beat us.
Things that surrounded it before it actually happened. It's kind of like with the Civil War. What we're talking about, the Civil War, is really not actually what happened. The causes and what led to the Civil War were not exactly what they make it out to be. I'm not going to go on a tangent there. But people love to take their agenda and to paint history with the paintbrush of their agenda. So the Nazis come back, and you now have World War II stemming up. This is wild. Everybody's coming against the Nazis. I'm not saying they were good people. They were not. They were occultists. They were very much racist in the term that they wanted to perfect their race. They wanted to bring out their latent abilities, if in fact they were descendants of these Aryan.
Hey, Lars, good to see you, mate.
That's what they wanted to do. And again, this is their belief. This is what they believe was their birthright. And something led them to Antarctica. And by the way, they come back from Antarctica and say that they had contact with the king of the earth. You do the math, figure out what that means. The king of the earth, prince of the power of the air, the god of this world, king over Shambhala. It's not really that much of a stretch. They obviously came in contact with Satan if they came in contact with the king of the world.
Yeah.
In their terms. They come back.
You remember around 2016, 17, all world leaders were visiting Antarctica? They were going down there to see this king. I reckon that's why they went there. And you remember Buzz Aldrin said he had a heart attack, and he says there's great evil in Antarctica. And what does God say? Men's hearts will fail them. And look what happened to Buzz Aldrin.
World War II starts. Interestingly enough, before the war started, they started sending submarines of some of their.
Yeah, it's good fun, isn't it, Buzz?
Talking about doctors.
We had a good chat last night.
Most brilliant minds, the magicians, occultists. Before, during, and even after World War II, they began a massive exodus of what totaled to be over 1 million Nazis that just fully disappeared. And they didn't know they disappeared until after the war, when, they were doing checks and balances on everything in Germany, the entire Reichstag bank disappeared. By design. I mean, this is all by design. The Nazis knew what they were doing. They were taking these submarines before, during, and after the war in this massive exodus. By the way, during the war, a lot of strange things were happening in Nazi Germany. You had this society called the Vril Society that were really showing their colors. The Vril Society was the inner workings or the upper echelon of the aforementioned Thule Society. So the Thule Society was basically that was the group, that was the general assembly of this secret society. But the Vril Society was like the upper echelon of the Thule Society. And the Vril Society were the ones who were actually doing the seances, who were trying to tap into the Vril power that we've already discussed. The Vril was that power of creation and destruction, that power that would also awaken their abilities, going back to the Vril Ya superior race, who they believe were their ancestors currently living inside the earth. I do want to talk about the Vril Society once we get there. We've got a little more to cover here about the war. World War II takes place. The Nazis basically get their butts handed to them. That's what we're told. Hitler's dead, along with all these other major German Nazi leaders.
Diane, I'm going to have to start drinking again so them guys can get their jobs back. I drink enough that 1,700 would need to fill it.
Declared dead. That's not what happened. Although the newspapers were saying that. We have the now declassified FBI documents, which we took from the FBI website. We got them directly from the FBI. We show them inside of the film. We do high-resolution zooms. You can see the images. Hitler was spotted in Argentina after World War II, alive and well near the foothills of the Andes, which is interesting because that's also allegedly were one of the entrances to the Chincana.
Wow.
You also around that same.
That's why they went to Argentina. Wow, I never knew that.
Had all of these European twins, identical twins, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, identical twins being born to South American women.
Yeah.
They were not blonde-haired and
the boys from Brazil, that was based on a true story.
blue-eyed. And then we find out that not only Hitler made it to Argentina, according to the FBI documents, but there was another very famous Nazi doctor who made it down there as well, who continued to practice his eugenics, by the way.
Wow.
He paraded around as a veterinarian to basically keep his cover from being blown. But he did all sorts of these experiments on the women down there, and he was going around delivering their children. There's a whole lot of information out there about that. I don't want to go into too much of a tangent. Fascinating stuff. We don't cover all of that in the film. That's just a little bit of a side note from our research. Many people probably know his name. It's Joseph Mengele.
Yeah.
He was considered a mad scientist from Nazi Germany. Mengele was going around doing all these things in South America, freely operating, and he was going house to house delivering the children of the people who he was genetically manipulating somehow. And that's why we have a whole lot of these European families now living there that were born from. Angela
Merkel is supposed to be Hitler's daughter. Whether it's from cloning or what, I don't know. But yeah, Angela Merkel is related to Hitler, apparently.
South American lineages, but they appear to be German. It's completely wild. And what really made it even crazier was that you could say it's a conspiracy theory, but then Time Magazine actually covered it. Yeah, really wild stuff about Joseph Mengele and everything that he did down there. He was also one of the doctors who was known for trying to take twins and transplant. He would take the eyeballs out of twins and switch them. He was trying to figure out if twins could be interchanged with their organs and their body parts.
Wow.
Very, very demonic stuff. So anyway, the FBI recognized.
So he took their eyeballs out. Are you serious? That's some pretty wicked stuff there.
That Hitler was alive and well. He was he obviously had made it down to Argentina, the foothills of the Andes. From there, we believe that he went to Antarctica. And he said, well, why didn't he just go in the submarines? Because everybody else was going in subs.
Good question.
Hitler was a very, very sensitive target. Everyone was looking for him. The powers that lied to the world and told us that he was dead, they were on a mission to locate him. So because of him being such a high value target, he would not have gone with the mainstream masses that were accessing down in the submarines. And by the way, these submarines normally would have a payload of about 8 to 12 people. The Nazis were cramming upwards of 50 people in these submarines. And they were trying to get as many of them down to base 211 as they could as quickly as possible before, during, and after the war. Over 1 million of them made it to base 211. Then the leftovers were brought to America, forgiven of their war crimes, totally forgiven of their war crimes, such as Werner von Braun. He comes down and he ends up being like the father of NASA. Basically, NASA is created. The pharmaceutical industry is just booming now because the pharmaceutical industry came from Nazi Germany. Amphetamine.
I never knew that.
Yeah. Adderall.
I knew meth come from Germany. I knew that.
That was essentially crystal meth in a pill that the Nazis created. Yep.
That's how they done their blitzkrieg. They were on speed.
Nazis were able to stay up for weeks at a time on their amphetamine pills. All these pharmaceuticals that people take today and think that they're safe and effective, well, they're effective.
And guys, when they're on methamphetamine, they start hallucinating. That's because they've been up for like 3 days, because that's what starts to happen when you stay up too late.
Not sure if they're safe. That was a product of Nazi Germany. The dexedrine, different types of methamphetamines, that all came from Nazi Germany. That's how the Nazis were able to stay up for weeks plotting and fighting and doing all these things, all their missions around the world. They were high on amphetamines. Now, when we get into the real society and the seances that they were doing, we're going to learn that a lot of the technology and the information that the Nazis had, they were getting it directly from otherworldly entities in their seances. Absolutely, they were getting technology, pharmakia, chemical compounds and formulations. Okay. They were not just sitting around making this stuff up. It's kind of reminiscent of Nikola Tesla and others who were bringing high technology to the world. Well, where did they get that technology? Well, they were in cahoots with certain entities, seances. Sometimes they're referred to as ascended masters. But this goes back to what was taking place when we look back to the Native American stories of the reptilian coming through the portal and corrupting mankind and teaching mankind magic, cutting of roots, mixing of things to make potions, all kinds of, what eventually turned into synthesizing things. So I definitely believe that does come at its core origin point. It would be from seances. It's kind of like Black Sabbath said there was always the fifth member of the band in the room writing the music for them. Keith Richards from the Rolling Stones would talk about sitting in a chair, certain body parts getting hard and cold and being taken over and foaming at the mouth. Santana, you've got these crazy interviews that they gave where they would be taken over by an entity, and then the next thing you know, they've got hit music that the world loves. So yes, I do believe a lot of the technology, the pharmaceuticals, chemical compounds, absolutely came through channeling sessions. People were wanting to break on through to that other side. Jim Morrison, no pun intended, break on through to the other side. It was not uncommon for some of the movers and shakers, the famous, those that are loved by the world. They got a lot of their talents, a lot of their abilities, a lot of what they offered to the world in their inventions, technology. Yes, absolutely, through channeling sessions, seances. The most plausible theory is that Hitler made his way to Argentina first. And by the way, the Catholic Church was very well known for smuggling Nazis into South America.
Yeah, that's true.
The Catholic Church believed apparently in what they were doing. And again, we need to really make sure we don't get it twisted. When we study the Nazis, you can't separate the Nazis from the occult. The occult meaning tapping into higher entities, tapping into ascended masters, locating ancient technology, reviving all of these things, and also the interest in the inner earth and the races that might live inside the earth, dating back to being descendants of the Nephilim. Well, the Catholic Church also has set up churches on top of many of these, and I mean the Vatican, by the way, not necessarily the Catholic Church on the corner in your neighborhood, but the Vatican has been setting up churches, taking land, sacred land, entrances into these hollow earth entrance, catacomb cities, building churches, cathedrals on top of them. Interestingly enough, one in particularly right there near one of the Chinkana entrances. So the Catholic Church had a hand in smuggling the Nazis out of Nazi Germany. We're talking about the most elite of the Nazis, not the leftovers, but the main course Nazis, the upper echelon, the ones that knew and did, the movers and shakers. And you say, yeah, but we got movers and shakers brought to America through, Project Paperclip, Operation Paperclip. Yeah, we did, but they were the leftovers. Believe me, Von Braun and NASA and the pharmaceutical industry, that was all the fat trimmed off of the steak. The steak made it down to Antarctica, and it was planned accordingly. So the Nazis make it down there. It makes most sense that Hitler and some of the others that were the more sensitive targets made it down. And I do believe there's some very possibility that they went into the Chinkana and that's how they made it to Antarctica, to not be out in the main ocean, to not be out where they could be monitored. Possibly Base 211, because General Donitz again said that Base 211 was a fortress secured inside the ice. So we're not talking about a base built on the surface here. It's very likely that the Chinkana directly opened up into Base 211. It's just a theory, but that would make the most sense. Now let's talk about World War 2.5.
This is part 3. I tried to find part 1 and 2, but I couldn't.
It's amazing how much the American government has completely deceived the taxpayer. I mean, they take your money and they lie to you about where it's going. People have really in recent days really talked a lot about that, but let's just go back to post World War II. We're told the Nazis have been completely defeated. Our government brings back a bunch of Nazis, forgives them of their war crimes, and then installs them as high-ranking government officials, gives them money and resources, and gives them new names even, to where they're slightly unrecognizable in some situations, depending on how bad the war crimes were. If their war crimes weren't as bad, they could keep their name. Anyway, there's a lot of interesting things there. The Nazis were down in Antarctica, the powerful Nazis. They had a fortress in the ice, and according to their own declarations, had been in contact with the king of the world. So we have a very interesting scenario arise known as Operation High Jump.
And there you go. I couldn't. Oh, you idiot. Hang on, guys. Let's take that up again. Hang on, put it up so I can load it.
Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of the Sharpening Report. Glad to have you all here, glad to be here. So I got something kind of special for you today. First, I'm going to play a presentation that I did at a recent Prophecy Watchers conference on CERN and demonic.
Oh, Diane, the lefties are going to go nuts over that if Trump does that. I've been trolling the lefties about Trump. Oh, hang on. Let me show you what I found, what I've done too. Hang on. I'll let this go.
Portals. I want to play that. And then in the second half of the show, I want to go through some research that I've kind of been compiling. I haven't had a chance to really write it into a like an article or a blog post or anything just yet, but I have all the notes. And I want to go through that. It's all about the rapture and light. So the basic gist of it is science.
Okay, guys, the lefties have been going nuts over this alligator Alcatraz. Like they're saying they're going to lock little babies up and feed them to the gators. And they're really being bizarre with it. So I posted this to their site. I got the job. Oh, that was funny. They didn't like that. They called me a Nazi mongrel.
The scientists in the lab have created a sort of solid light. And a good friend of mine, Marty, hi Marty, a very good friend of mine, brought up the connection of, hey, you know, I've heard that before the fall, Adam and Eve were clothed in light. Could this be similar in some way to the light that they were clothed with? And then that got me thinking, oh yeah. And then when the rapture happens and we're glorified, we're transformed, and it seems like we're going to be wearing that light again. Well, come to find out, there's a bunch of stuff in the Dead Sea Scrolls about that as well, about you know, us being glorified and wearing light and all of that. So I wanted to do that in the second half. Now, for that, I do have all of my notes, but like I said, I don't have it compiled into like an article, but I still am going to make those notes available. And just for full disclosure, I did use Grok to help me organize my notes into like bullet points and stuff. It just makes it a lot easier than me doing it manually myself. But it's just an organization kind of thing. So I'm going to make all those notes available, and there's a couple different ways that you can get that. So dailyrenegade.com is the best place to go if you want this full video, including both my CERN presentation and the light and the rapture stuff that we're going to be talking about after. If you want all of that in video form, go to dailyrenegade.com, and there at Daily Renegade, you'll actually be able to download a PDF that's going to have all of my notes from the light and the rapture stuff. It'll have all the notes, all the bullet points, all the sources, all the quotations, every reference to where these things are in the Dead Sea Scrolls, so you can check them out yourself. You can download the PDF, and that's for members only. Also at dailyrenegade.com, we have a community tab where you can fellowship with like-minded believers. You can talk about this or whatever you like. There's no censorship there. So that's all at dailyrenegade.com. If you don't want a PDF and you want more of like an article, like a blog post, if you don't want to download a separate file, then you can go to joshpeck.substack.com, and there you'll be able to view it sort of like in blog format, like on a web page. Not only that, but you also get the full episode in audio-only format. If you just wanted the podcast, the audio-only podcast version, you'll be able to get that there, and that does include both the CERN presentation and the light and the rapture stuff. So yeah, dailyrenegade.com or joshpeck.substack.com. I suggest just getting both, because that way you get the best of both worlds. So all that's available. The links are in the description below. Also, before we jump in, if you haven't had a chance, please subscribe to this channel and click the bell to turn on all notifications so you know when we put up a new episode. All right, so all that being said, we'll get right into it. So first, here is my here's a recent presentation that I did about CERN and are they opening demonic portals, and what does this have to do with Revelation, certain passages in Revelation, specifically Revelation 9. So here you go. Watch this.
How is everybody doing? Is everybody enjoying the conference so far? Great. That's what we like to hear.
I like Josh. CERN's pretty complicated, but he explains it rather simply. So he's a good communicator, I think, anyway.
Well, today we have a heavy topic, and I'm going to try to keep it as light as we can. I'll try to keep it as simple as we can. You know, I was actually just talking to somebody right before this presentation, begging me, please, Josh, keep it simple. And you know, a realization came to me. You know, it's not that this stuff is complicated, quantum physics, CERN, all this stuff. It's that we've been taught wrong, and
I agree. It's not that difficult. Quantum physics, big is bigger and small is smaller. That's basically the theory.
sometimes it takes time for us to unlearn things that we've been taught wrong to actually get at what's real. So don't worry if you listen to this and if some of it goes over your head. For me, when I was first starting out, I would watch Chuck Missler presentations a lot, over and over and over again, because one time wasn't enough. The first time it would always go over my head, but after I watched it a few times, it started to make sense. And it's not that, you know, we're all so dumb that we can't understand this stuff. That's what the scientists want you to believe. That's not true. What it is that we've all been taught wrong, and it takes a few times for us to really get what's right. So we're going to get into all that. So the question of tonight is CERN opening demonic portals? Yes. This is actually my only slide, so you all answered me. That's great. Have a good night. No, let's. But this is a serious question because this has been floating around the internet for a long time. And there's some real reasons to believe that it might be true. There's some
making the TV.
We're going to get into all that and some other certain conspiracy theories. Let's see what's true and what's not. Just for a brief introduction, in case you're not aware, my name is Josh Peck. I work with Prophecy Watchers. Written several books and directed 3 documentary films. My main websites are Prophecy Watchers and DailyRenegade.com. Of course, you should all be familiar with Prophecy Watchers if you don't know what DailyRenegade.com is. It's a place where I can put all of my videos that I can't put on YouTube because YouTube censors and deletes things like it's an addiction, like it's a drug. We've had full channels deleted. And so we've had to start over and over again. So finally, I decided enough was enough, and my wife and I started DailyRenegade.com. So if you'd like, you can visit that, become a member. We'd love to have you as part of the family. My email, if you have any questions or comments or anything like that, my email is joshpeckdisclosure@gmail.com. Feel free to email me. And if you're interested in this topic, check out my books, Quantum Creation and Cherubim Chariots. They are available at my table. I'm in the Venice room, and I will be there right after this. And also prophecywatchers.com. If you're going to buy them online, get them at prophecywatchers.com, not Amazon. Why would we want to support Jeff Bezos when you could support an amazing prophecy ministry that is being the light to the world that the world so desperately needs right now?
Amen.
So let's get started. Let's talk about the basics of CERN in case anybody's not familiar with this. If you are brand new to this topic, you are at the right place. So CERN is an acronym that in English stands for European Organization for Nuclear Research. That's what it is in French, and I'm not going to try to pronounce it because I don't speak French. It is the governing
I speak French rather well.
Body who decides what to do with the LHC, the Large Hadron Collider. That is the big machine that everybody kind of freaks out about. The LHC, Large Hadron Collider, it's the largest particle collider in the world as of right now. China's working on something that might be even bigger than that, but we're about 20 years away from that. There are also similar machines that CERN operates, but the LHC is the big one. Their stated goal is to learn as much about the origin and makeup of the universe. That's usually what they put out publicly. Now, for quite some time, there has been suspicion circulating online whether or not CERN is an innocent institution or something more nefarious, and I'm sure that's why you are all here. By the way, I got to hand it to you. Thank you all for coming here and not LA Marzulli. I'm surprised to see so many people here. When they put me up against LA, I was like, oh no, I'm in trouble. We hear them making a whole bunch of ruckus over there. LA's great. Okay, history of CERN. So a large portion of CERN is found in a commune in eastern France called Saint-Genès-Poëli. And this commune was actually identified as 2 separate towns. Before it was given the name Saint-Genès-Poëli in 1887, the 2 towns were named Saint-Genès and Poëli. Now, interestingly enough, Poëli used to be a small Roman city by the name of Apolliacum. Now, it's believed that it was given that name out of dedication to the god Apollon, or as we might recognize, Apollo or Apollyon. Apollon can be identified with the biblical Apollyon or Abaddon in Revelation. Now, Apollo was worshipped by the Romans as well as the Greeks. In Moirés Indri, that is just a guess, I have no idea how to pronounce that, a commune in central France, Apollo was equated with the Celtic god Atepomaras. These names. You know, at least in biblical Christianity, we have names that make sense, like Jehoshaphat and Zedekiah and Hezekiah.
The
What do you want
opposite.
to be when you grow up?
A surfer. I want to live right near the water and roll straight into the waves.
Like a seal?
So these two characters were combined to create Apollo Atepomaris, which can be translated as great horseman or possessing a great horse. Now, in the Celtic belief, horses were closely related to the sun. Now, the interesting thing to note is the connection between this idea of Apollo being associated with horses in France, where part of the LHC and CERN resides, and what the book of Revelation says about Abaddon. And the shapes of the locusts were like unto horses prepared unto battle, and on their heads were, as it were, crowns like gold, and their faces were as the faces of men, and they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue hath his name Apollyon. That's from Revelation 9. Now, given these descriptions, is it possible that CERN might have something to do with the opening of the bottomless pit described in Revelation 9? Now, obviously, this wouldn't be today. This is in the tribulation, but could that be the catalyst? This is a possibility a lot of researchers, myself included, have looked into. But before we can get into that specifically about Revelation 9, while thinking about Revelation 9, we can look into some other mythology and see some potential connections to CERN. And this stuff is weird, mythology surrounding CERN. So the word CERN, not the acronym, the actual word, can be found in ancient mythology. In Celtic mythology, and of course all this mythology is pagan, in Celtic mythology, the god Cernunnos is depicted as having antlers or horns. That's that first picture on the lower left there. He's also shown with torques around his neck or hanging from his antlers. And torques, that's that middle picture. Cernunnos is sometimes recognized as the god of nature or fertility. And torques are large metal neck rings that were once associated with nobility and high social
The Vikings had them. I didn't know that.
status. Cernunnos has also been associated with Baphomet, an important deity in occultism.
I didn't know
And
that.
Baphomet is also synonymous with the symbol of the goat pentagram, also known as the sigil of Baphomet, which is that one on the right there.
You know, no one gets into full-time ministry to make money. At least no one should. Given that, Daily Renegade accepts donations from those who care to help keep us going. Now, because Daily Renegade does not want to be told by the government what we can and can't say, we're not 501c3. So your donations are not tax deductible, but that's not why you're giving anyway, to get something back for yourself. Speaking of which, we here are never going to promise that if you donate, God will reward you with even more financial success. We're not about making promises for God here. But what I can promise is your donations are very much appreciated and help the continuation of everything we do here at Daily Renegade to reach the world with the truth of the Bible. Also, as many of you know, my son Nathan has had some very serious medical issues that we are treating with good, all-natural and holistic remedies. But of course, those are very expensive and are not covered by insurance. So your donations help go towards his health care as well. If you can't afford to donate, you can always donate your time in prayer, which is far more valuable anyway, let's be serious. So pray for our wisdom, pray for God's guidance for us, and that we never lose focus on what's really important, which is using Daily Renegade as a light of truth that the world so desperately needs right now, especially in these times. As always, thank you so much for your generosity, and I pray God blesses you greatly. Now, the myth of Cernunnos is explained in further and more provocative detail in Italian witchcraft. And here, Cernunnos is only known as CERN, just plain old CERN, and has a brother named Lupus.
CERN is seen as the stag god, while Lupus is seen as the wolf god. And it's said that on the day of the spring equinox, Lupus was hit by a bolt of lightning shaped like an arrow while hunting a deer. Lupus then died, and on the next morning rose from the underworld as the sun. CERN learned of his brother's death and became the god of this world. And the only thing left behind from the death of Lupus was his wolf skin, which was found in the forest by another hunter. And as it turns out, the pelt had the magical power to transform men into wolves. The first man to wear this wolf pelt became a priest of Lupercus and founded the Society of the Luperci. Now, this is mythology. None of this is real. But what's interesting about mythology is sometimes there's a kernel of truth. And we know it's not real because he became the sun, so they didn't have the sun before then. How did anything live, you know? But a lot of what mythology does is it'll borrow from other established things that are more rooted in reality. So we actually find an interesting parallel story in the book of Jasher concerning Nimrod. And Cush, the son of Ham, the son of Noah, took a wife in those days in his old age, and she bare a son, and they called his name Nimrod, saying, at that time the sons of men, again, began to rebel and transgress against God, and the child grew up, and his father loved him exceedingly, for he was the son of his old age. I'm going to break real quick. In case you're not familiar with the book of Jasher, it's an extra biblical book. The origins are a little dicey. It's kind of mysterious. So take it with a grain of salt, but it does kind of expand on some of the creation stuff in Genesis. All right, so continuing on. This is what's interesting. And the garments of skin, which God made for Adam and his wife when they went out of the garden, were given to Cush. For after the death of Adam and his wife, the garments were given to Enoch, the son of Jared. And when Enoch was taken up to God, he gave them to Methuselah, his son. And at the death of Methuselah, Noah took them and brought them to the ark, and they were with him until he went out of the ark. And in their going out, Ham stole those garments from Noah, his father, and he took them and hid them from his brothers. And when Ham begat his firstborn Cush, he gave him the garments in secret, and they were with Cush many days, and Cush also concealed them from his sons and brothers. And when Cush had begotten Nimrod, he gave him those garments through his love for him. And Nimrod grew up, and when he was 20 years old, he put on those garments. And Nimrod became strong when he put on the garments, and God gave him might and strength. And he was a mighty hunter in the earth. Yea, he was a mighty hunter in the field, and he hunted the animals, and he built altars, and he offered upon them the animals before the Lord. That's Jasher 7:23 through 30. So I'm not saying that this actually happened or that this is what was originally true, but wouldn't it make sense if this was really what happened, how mythology would take that later and twist it around to the Lupercus thing and a man becomes the sun and all this stuff? I mean, this seems pretty straightforward to me. Later we get the rest of the story. Nimrod dwelt in Shinar, and he reigned securely, and he fought with his enemies, and he subdued them, and he prospered in all his battles. And all nations and tongues heard of his fame, and they gathered themselves to him, and they bowed down to the earth, and they brought him offerings, and he became their Lord and King, and they all dwelt with him in the city of Shinar. And Nimrod reigned in the earth over all the sons of Noah, and they were all under his power and counsel, and all the earth was of one tongue and words of union. But Nimrod did not go in the ways of the Lord, and he was more wicked than all the men that were before him from the days of the flood until those days. Jasher 7:44 through 46. So obviously this is a big expansion on the Genesis story of Babel. But we can see how Nimrod could be identified with CERN as the god of this world, as well as Satan himself, according to 2 Corinthians 4:4, which reads, in whom the god of this world hath blinded the minds of them which believe not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine unto them. Nimrod may also be identified with the first person who put on Lupus's pelts and became the priest of Lupercus. Maybe this is where that mythology came from. There are many ways to make connections and assign biblical entities to various myths surrounding CERN. Let's talk about modern CERN history.
Yeah, but them werewolves, they're like the skinwalkers, so there's a lot of traffic about them. We know all about them.
So before CERN was actually a laboratory, it was a council whose purpose was just to build a laboratory. In 1952, the European Council for Nuclear Research was established by 12 European governments. CERN has had a number of achievements throughout the years, specifically in the field of quantum physics. In 1973, weak nuclear currents were discovered, which led to the discovery of the W and Z bosons. which are the elementary particles responsible for mediating the weak interaction. 1983. It's okay if you don't understand this. I had to put it in because we have to talk about some of the stuff that CERN's actually done. This is just, it's a lot of quantum physics stuff, but the discovery of the W and Z bosons, which are just particles, but it was what is now known as the standard model of particle physics, which is what science base everything in particle physics around. It's not complete. There are some gaps, but they're working on it. The W and Z bosons are still among the most exciting discoveries to date. In 1995, the first creation of anti-hydrogen, which is an antimatter counterpart to hydrogen atoms, occurred in what's known as the PS210 experiment. So a normal hydrogen atom is made of an electron and proton, which are both subatomic particles. But an anti-hydrogen atom, because it's antimatter, is made of a positron and an antiproton, which is just the antimatter counterparts. And just like in the movies and in TV, if antimatter and matter come into contact, they annihilate. So we have to be careful with that.
Good on him, Guy. He's a hero.
Support for whatever life throws your way. Swiss, here life comes.
I got real life insurance to protect us financially. You can choose up to $2 million cover. Click to request a quote now.
A high-quality Japanese-style kitchen knife as a gift for less than $20. Holy shit, it's amazing. Seriously, this is a one-time thing, so don't be an idiot, guys. We have brought this deal back for the next 24 hours only. Our knives left.
In 2010, 38 atoms of anti-hydrogen were isolated. Anti-hydrogen was then able to be maintained without decaying for 15 minutes in 2011. And it's the hope of scientists that by studying antimatter, they can discover the answers to what's known as the baryon asymmetry problem. Basically, they wonder, you know, in the universe, if there was this big bang and everything is dispersed evenly,
don't
why
lean
do we
on
have
the
so much regular
laptop.
matter and not as much antimatter? It should be even. Of course, we all know the answer. Well, God made it that way. He didn't want everything to annihilate. So it makes sense to me, but you know, scientists aren't going to come to that conclusion. So this has been an ongoing problem, and they call it the baryon asymmetry problem because they can't give normal names to things. Again, their job, a lot of them, I don't want to say every scientist, but by and large the establishment, they use these words because they want to make you feel dumb, so you're not onto them, so they can do whatever they want. And also they have big egos. You know, not every scientist does. I know many that don't. I know many Christians who just happen to be scientists, some who even work at CERN. And they don't have egos like that. Now, the Higgs boson was discovered in 2012 after a 40-year search. That's one of the biggest modern discoveries. Okay, let's get back into the really interesting stuff. Occult mysteries of CERN. That might look familiar to some of you, but if not, let me explain. So since its unveiling in 2004, CERN's statue of the dancing Shiva has caused quite a bit of controversy among Christians, especially in recent years. That statue is right in front of the CERN building.
And that's a Hadron Collider, that ring around it. That's a Hadron Collider. But I don't see anyone bring that up.
They display it proudly. Shiva is one of the main deities of Hinduism. He's part of the Trimurti, the Hindu Trinity. And Shiva is also known as the Destroyer, which might sound familiar, or the Transformer within the Trinity. One depiction of Shiva is known as the Nataraya, meaning Lord of the Dance. And this is the depiction that embodies the statue at CERN that they proudly have up there in front of their building. So the Nataraya depiction shows Shiva as the cosmic dancer who performs a divine dance to destroy a weary universe. Shiva does this in order to make preparations for the god Brahma to start the creation process. And the statue shows Shiva in the middle of a circle of flames with his left leg raised and balancing over the demonic dwarf Apis-Mara, who represents ignorance. So what does all this mean? Well, given the mythology behind the statue...
So that ring, he didn't pick it up. That looks like the Hadron Collider. Let's say they're not flames on that ring. Let's say they're the connections to the Hadron Collider. I don't see how they don't see that. That is the Hadron Collider, that ring.
Type of scientific pioneering CERN represents, it's caused many to wonder if there's a deeper meaning here. Some have even gone as far as to claim that Apis-Mara represents the church, you know, the demon dwarf of ignorance. You know, to them, that might represent the church or the true God. Shiva represents Satan, and the circle of flame represents a spiritual portal. Some say this. And Shiva represents Satan traveling through the portal to destroy the church, subdue God, and take over the world. Some say that. There are those who believe that CERN and the LHC will be instrumental in this process. So just as with the statue, the logo of CERN, which is that first picture, top left, the logo of CERN has caused an equal amount of controversy because if you turn it upside down, some have pointed out, well, that looks a little like 3 6s. The CERN logo resembles 3 6s, which some claim is a clear sign of the biblical mark of the beast from Revelation. I don't know about this one, but I'll get to why. But that second picture right next to it is it flipped upside down with the 6s highlighted. It also represents resembles a hand gesture that's thought to signify the 3 6s of the mark of the beast, which is that bottom left one. Most times this hand gesture is seen all over or over an individual's right eye, signifying the all-seeing eye of the Illuminati and Freemasonry, things like that. And there are some who interpret the CERN acronym in the middle of the 3 6s as representing the actual eye.
Hey, everyone. You know, concerning the economically unstable times that we live in, it is a great idea to convert some of your savings into real money. Now, there is a big difference between real money and what we call money, which is actually currency. So our dollar is currency, which fluctuates. Real money, like silver, is a store of value over time. The best way to think of it is like this. If you had saved $1,000 in cash back in the late 60s, the late 1960s, that $1,000 would still be $1,000 today, but it would buy you significantly less today due to inflation. Now, if you saved that same $1,000 in silver back in the 1960s, it would be around $28,000 today. So one of the best ways to protect your purchasing power is in real money, more specifically, silver. Now, you can buy and have the metal shipped discreetly to your door. And what most people don't know is that you can actually convert your IRA or even your 401k into physical silver rather than having all your life savings tied up in the...
Oh, mate, we don't eat silver. Okay, back.
To stop trusting the evil beast financial system of the world and protect your assets today.
Now, most people outside of conspiratorial research often deduce that CERN's logo as representing nothing more but the design of a synchrotron particle accelerator, which is that picture on the bottom right. That's what they say the logo is modeled after. It doesn't look exactly the same, but the reason is that it said that was the original design for the logo, that bottom right one, but it looked too much like a black hole, so they wanted to stylize it and jazz it up a little bit. So in my humble opinion, the symbol of the logo, it really does appear to be a coincidence to me. It's not exactly 3 6s. I mean, if you look at the top right one, you got that little part on the right hanging up. I mean, you can't just ignore that and say, well, it's 3 6s, but this little piece here doesn't matter. I think it might just be a coincidence. I think this is one of those kind of online little known facts about CERN is that the internet was actually created there. The World Wide Web began as a project at CERN called Enquire by Tim Berners-Lee in 1989 and Robert Kalau in 1990. And the project was originally intended as a way for researchers to share information. The very first website was activated in 1991. It's still accessible today. On April 30th, 1993, CERN announced the World Wide Web would be available for everyone. Which radically changed the world. The invention of the internet at CERN is of great importance to those who connect CERN with the mark of the beast in Revelation. And he causeth all, both great and small, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand and on their foreheads, that no man might buy or sell, save that he had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Some of you might have heard this theory before, but one point that's brought up is how much of the world's buying and selling takes place on the internet, but a more specific clue is given in the actual number 666. So the letters of the Greek and Hebrew alphabet also can represent numbers. And if you were to take 3 6s and translate them through the Hebrew alphabet, you would be left with 3 of the letter Vav in Hebrew. And the letter Vav can translate to the English letter W. So 3 6s in Hebrew would equate to 3 W's in English. So this would appear as www, which of course in our modern era is recognized as standing for World Wide Web, and it starts every website. Now that's been a semi-popular theory in Christian eschatology for a few years now. I certainly didn't come up with this. I first heard it maybe about 10 years ago. But as some have pointed out, there are actual problems to this, and there's a reason why I'm not so sure that this is something to freak out too much about. Now, first and probably most obvious, the text in question was written in Greek and not Hebrew, but that alone doesn't discount the theory, since most of the Bible is written in Hebrew and those who wrote it spoke Hebrew, but it can hardly be used to support it either. Now, another contention is the fact that the text states, "Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man." Well, obviously, the internet is not a man. It is something that was invented by man, sure. Also, the text mentions 666. That is exactly 666. And I think this is really the thing that debunks the whole thing here. Because if we were to add the 3 vowels of W, of Hebrew, the 3 vowels of Hebrew, the 6 and the 6 and the 6, we would actually be left with 18 if we were to add those up. So it's believed that the actual number of the beast will add up to 666 in this Hebrew number system or Greek, and will not be merely 3 individual 6s, because the text says 666. It does not say that the number of the beast will be 6 and 6 and 6. So this one, I personally, it doesn't convince me, but I get why it does to some people. All right, so let's talk about
I agree with Josh usually. Everything he said then makes sense.
how the LHC at CERN actually works. Because to know if CERN is going to open a portal, we need to know how it works, what it can do, and what it can't. So the only reason that the LHC works is because of a scientific study called quantum field theory, and it's because this theory is actually correct. I'm going to talk a little bit about it, but remember, it's okay if you don't get it right away. Just watch this again or watch other videos about it. I got a ton of videos on YouTube about it and lots of stuff. It's one of those things where I'm going to teach you something that goes against what probably all of you have been taught in school. Unless we have any physicists in the crowd, then you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. But most of us in school have been taught a certain way in middle school and high school. But it's not exactly accurate. So QFT, quantum field theory, it's the most accurately predictive science that we have today. It's absolutely correct. You can make accurate predictions with it. This just is how reality works. And QFT says that particles really aren't small little bits of matter like we typically think, but they're instead fluctuations of energy in quantum fields. Now, what I mean by that is
running empty's a bit of a pain. At Origin, we're helping you keep your LPG topped up with simple orders through our app. That's all kinds of useful.
Quantum
Sorry about that, guys.
So we have a gravitational field. We have an electromagnetic field. Those are quantum fields. They exist at all points in the universe all at once. So the gravitational field exists with the electromagnetic field, with every field, every fundamental particle. And fundamental just means the smallest of the small, the smallest you can get, like a photon. Photons come from the electromagnetic field. They exist at all points in the universe. Now, when energy spikes at any given point in a quantum field at any place, that spike is the particle. So it's not that spike of energy creates the particle. That spike is the particle. So particles aren't these little bits of matter. They're actually just energy. And that's where we have to kind of unlearn some stuff. Because when I was in school, it was, well, it's just smaller and smaller and smaller bits of matter the more you go down. It's not true. They are spikes in energy in a quantum field. So in short, particles are nothing more than spikes in energy, not tiny pieces of physical matter. That's exciting for us, though, because the big question is, Where does the original energy come from to cause this spike, this particle, this spike of energy in the first place? Where does that energy come from? Well, ultimately, while many admit, many scientists, that it must be something outside of our physical universe, something extra dimensional. If you can get a scientist to even admit that, like they'll take it that far, but they usually don't go any further. A lot of times they'll say, well, we don't know, it's a mystery. Well, the energy has to come from somewhere. Energy can't be created or destroyed, right? Well, I think I might know. I think I might know where this energy is coming from. By faith, we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that in the things which are seen were made of things which are visible. Hebrews 11:3, and then we also have, he is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For by him all things were created that are in heaven and that are on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or principalities or powers, all things were created through him and for him. And he is before all things, and in him all things consists. The Spirit of God has made me, and the breath of the Almighty gives me life. So the energy comes from, I believe, the voice of God, and God said, right? That's where that energy comes from. That's what particles are. Think about this. Every particle of every atom in your body right now is created, held together, and actively sustained right now as a living testament to the awesome creative power, genius, and love of Almighty God. His voice is sustaining the particles in your body right now as we speak. Isn't that amazing? From the moment he spoke creation into existence, that has carried over and is sustaining us all now. It's just mind-blowing. I could study this for 100 years, and that will never cease to amaze me. So let's do a quick review. So particles are not tiny bits of matter. They're spikes in energy. And so because of that, when the LHC smashes two particles together, it's not that they're destroying the particles and looking at what's inside of the particles. Remember, particles aren't bits of matter. They're energy. So they're really slamming energy spikes together. Well, what does that do? Well, when two particles collide, when two of these energy spikes collide, they send out energy into the surrounding quantum fields, even those that we haven't discovered yet. And that energy can create spikes in unknown fields. And that's the goal. That's how you discover a new particle. And that energy will excite points in those other quantum fields that we haven't discovered yet. That's how the Higgs boson was discovered. So that's really what they're doing. And this is how we know that quantum field theory is true. If it wasn't true, the LHC wouldn't even work. It would have been a big waste of money. So the energy spikes are actual particles. So then physicists can examine the data from the collision and see if any previously undiscovered particles are there. So again, if quantum field theory were not true, the LHC at CERN would not work like it does today. And if you want more on quantum field theory, I can't get into it too much here because we're limited on time, but I have a book called Quantum Creation at my table. And I get into it there. Also, Cherubim Chariots is a really good one for this kind of stuff. But I get more into it there. And again, it's okay if it doesn't make sense right now. It's one of these things that we have to kind of unlearn what we've been taught, and it takes a few times. That's okay. It doesn't mean you're dumb or stupid. You are fully capable of understanding this. Anybody is. That's the big secret scientists don't want you to know. So, big question. Will CERN create a portal? Well, as it stands now, the LHC at CERN actually does the same thing that cosmic rays entering our atmosphere naturally do every day. That's surprising to a lot of people, but there are untold numbers of constant particle collisions happening in our atmosphere right now. We're constantly getting bombarded by cosmic rays. That's why God gave us an atmosphere to begin with. Without the atmosphere, we wouldn't be able to survive. We would have been dead long before we were born, if that makes any sense. We wouldn't be able to survive that. So it's good that we have an atmosphere, but that does create all of these particle collisions constantly. So if colliding particles together could create a demonic portal, that should be happening all around our planet at all times. So basically, if that were true, our entire atmosphere would be one gigantic portal that's permanently open. You'd look up and you'd just see hell everywhere. You know, what kind of existence is that? Clearly, we don't live in that environment, thank God. But even more, it would have been like that since the Earth was created. We've always had cosmic rays. So in short, if a demonic portal could be opened by colliding particles, CERN would be the least of our worries because we would have these portals all over our atmosphere.
Sounds like they're already battling the needle at die, let alone adding the prices to it.
What's one more at that point? But that's just the scientific part of it. Could there be another way? And what does the Bible say about it? Could there be another way that CERN might be instrumental in opening a portal? Let's talk about gravity. The graviton, the particle of gravity, is one of the strangest theoretical particles ever hypothesized. Now, gravitons have never been directly observed. That's why we have to call them theoretical. But physicists, they know that they exist because we have a gravitational field. You can't have a field without an associated particle. So it's possible, unless we're just completely misunderstanding gravity, which is possible too, but it's possible that assumed discovery might take place by means of particle colliders such as the LHC at CERN. So gravity in itself is still a mystery in many respects, but due to scientific advancement, the world may not be far off from the holy grail of physics, which is definitive proof that the graviton actually exists and the means to study its properties. And what makes the graviton especially interesting is its apparent ability, and this is predicted in the math, that it can flow freely between physical dimensions of space, which is wild. But this is predicted in the math, that this is the one particle that can do this. If there are higher dimensions, and there's every reason to believe that there are, a graviton can actually leak into a higher dimension. No other particles that we know of can do that. Among other potential discoveries, the graviton is at the top of the LHC's to-do list. So the idea is not always to look for the graviton itself, but to look for a gap where particles should be after a collision. So the two particle detectors of the LHC are named CMS and Atlas, and those are the two main ones, and they're able to show us the aftermath of a particle collision. And as in any collision, debris is thrown out and distributed fairly evenly. But if the detector shows a gap where debris should be, then that could be evidence that it's gravitons and they've escaped into a higher dimension. Now, again, the math predicts that gravitons can escape our 3 dimensions of space, and physicists are already coming up with ways to utilize that natural ability. So there's an idea that gravitons can be used as a way to communicate with beings of higher dimensions. Most physicists would agree that higher dimensions exist. There's a lot of evidence to support it. And so the question comes up, well, are there conscious beings there? Well, why not? There's conscious beings here. Well, can we communicate with them? They're already working on this. Well, and again, that might sound like the stuff of science fiction, but physicists are seriously considering this. And have been for years, and they're very open about it. It's been in documentaries. So if gravitons are discovered and used as a way to communicate with beings of higher dimensions or parallel universes, this might be what tells the world that we're not alone. And while many are waiting for a type of disclosure event in which otherworldly beings present themselves and their spacecraft to humanity, we might be surprised to find out that these beings are going to present themselves in a different way. And this may begin with an established communication through gravitons. And there are steps towards this goal that must be taken. First, the confirmed discovery of gravitons. Next would be learning to repeat the detection in a lab by creating gravitons. And they would do that by Einstein's general theory of relativity through experimentation. And once that's accomplished, there will be enough information to go on to learn how to manipulate the gravitons themselves. So the idea is to manipulate the spin of gravitons. Every particle, they have a spin. And you can manipulate the spin of gravitons either up or down, then string them together, and you can create a type of binary code through these gravitons. 1 up, 2 down, 2 up, whatever. So then the idea is to make that string of gravitons with this binary message, this coded message. And then next, they would send the strings of gravitons to higher dimensions, which gravitons do naturally anyway, so no extra technology would be needed to do that.
I have just started a Substack. What is a Substack, you might ask? It is a place that contains early access to audio-only podcast versions of full Daily Renegade videos, plus my personal blog, which includes original articles, show notes, interview transcripts, and so much more. This is the only place to get this amazing resource, and it is not available to the general public. Adding a subscription to my Substack to your daily Renegade membership will ensure that you have full access to every format of everything that I do. So head on over to joshpeck.substack.com or click on the link in the description below to join up now for only $5 a month or $50 a year. And if you can do it, I suggest doing the $50 a year because it's cheaper in the long run, and essentially you get 2 months for free. So I cannot wait to see you there. Take care, and God bless. Finally, they would just set up a particle detector and wait for a response. Horrifying. Now, we as Christians know what's beyond our physical universe and what kind of entities dwell there. The scientists might not know, and they might be very excited about this, but we know. Unbeknownst to the scientists, the only things they'll be able to communicate with are fallen angels and demons.
Oh, it's horrible.
We provide insurance solutions to protect small business, offering advice and knowledge to make informed.
Welcome to the Institute.
So in a way, doesn't this sound like prayer and veneration of ancient false gods?
Yeah.
It might be through technology, but it's still kind of the same thing, isn't it? Rather than by going about it through spirituality, they'll be using science to communicate with these beings that the Bible expressly forbids us to communicate with for very good reason. They're dangerous. And, this is because these beings want nothing more than to deceive and destroy humanity. So this leads us to wonder what the world might look like after interdimensional communication is established. Well, we might have that answer in Revelation. And the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth. And to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. And he opened the bottomless pit, and there arose smoke out of the pit, as the smoke of the great furnace. And the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit. And there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth. And unto them was given power, as the scorpions of the earth have power. And as that continues, it talks about how these scorpions torture unbelievers at the time, and they can't even die. This pain is so intense, they seek death, but death flees from them.
Mm.
So the angel sounding the trumpet, that's probably not a fallen angel, but it might be signaling that a fallen angel, because it says there's a star that fell from heaven. Some say that might be one of the good guys. Some say it might be one of the. I think it's fair to assume it's probably a fallen angel because it's a star falling from heaven. So the rest of the first verse in Revelation 9 states, "And I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit." Now, this is no ordinary star, according to our modern vernacular. Any star that would fall on the earth would destroy it. But there does seem to be a connection between stars and angels. And at times, the word star can actually represent an angel, like in Revelation 1:20, where it talks about the 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches. Very interesting. So there's a connection between stars and angels. We can also see that the star is a being of some sort because of the words "unto him was given the key." So this star being referred to with the pronoun him shows that this is a person of some sort, most likely a fallen angel. When I say person, I don't mean human, I just mean conscious being. Verse 2 tells us the angel opened the bottomless pit with the key, and that word key comes from the Greek word kleos and can be used as a metaphor for authority. So in a sense, this fallen angel was given permission to open the bottomless pit. We also learn in Revelation 1:18 that Jesus Christ himself held the keys of death and hell. So most likely it was Jesus who granted this permission or this authority. And there are times in the Bible when God used the enemy for his own purposes. After all, he is ultimately in control of these things anyway. He can use them as he sees fit. So, for example, the book of Exodus, we read that God hardened Pharaoh's heart. We also read later in Revelation chapter 9, and running low on time, so I got to speed through this once again, but it's about the 4 angels that are bound at Euphrates, and these do not seem to be good guys. So as we can see, there are times that the Lord will use the enemy to fulfill his own purposes, usually in the way of judgment, and the locust army is probably no different. But however all this plays out, before they are unleashed into our world, the gravitational communication aspect becomes more obvious when we consider these prophecies. Is it possible that the LHC at CERN will detect evidence of gravitons, which in turn could lead to a communication device to higher dimensional entities. After all, what particle but the graviton could best represent fallen angels? We even have reference to falling, an effect caused by gravity, in the description of the star/angel that opens the bottomless pit. Now remember, the area where CERN is located today is thought to have been dedicated to this same false god, Apollyon, in ancient times. It's the same area. I don't think that's a coincidence. Perhaps that dedication will manifest itself in the near future during the tribulation. So the idea behind all this is that it is possible the mechanism of opening the abyss, at least on the human physical side, is to open a communication system with gravitons or to breach the barrier between dimensions in order to explore what's there. And while that's happening on the physical side, on the spiritual side, God is allowing humans to do this, and an angel is permitted to open the bottomless pit, thereby releasing these horrific fallen cherubim on the world. And if you're curious why I say that those are specifically fallen cherubim, I have a book called Cherubim Chariots that talks about that. But it's like this. It's like God is saying, all right, you want to contact extra-dimensional entities that I clearly separated you from for your own protection. You don't want my protection? Then fine, you'll get exactly what you want. Here's the false gods you keep going after. Let's see how they treat you. Now, at that point, hell is literally poured out on the earth. Now, of course, the bottomless pit and the release of the locust prophecy in Revelation 9, it might not have anything to do with CERN. So I don't want to create a spirit of fear around it. And also, we know we as Christians, we're not going to be here for this prophecy anyway, because we'll have been raptured by that point. But even for people who miss the rapture and become Christians right after, the prophecy says that this is only going to affect non-believers. So these things are not allowed to hurt followers of God. They can only hurt those who reject him. So for us as Christians, there's really nothing to worry about here. But these things, these locusts, these fallen cherubim, these fallen angels, these are the false gods that people have always rejected God for. And these people are getting exactly what they want. They are getting to commune with their gods, their false gods, and this is their punishment. This is what they reap. Now, if you belong to Jesus, this punishment is not for you. Even more, you'll get to commune with your God as well, but instead of it being a horrific, abusive experience, it's going to be a wonderful, beautiful experience and exactly what you were created for. So if you do not know Jesus today, you really should get to know him now. Start a relationship with him, change your mind about him. That's what repenting means. Believe in him, repent of your sins, change your mind about your sins. Pray and ask him, ask to take part in his promised salvation after this life passes. Because one thing is for sure, you'll die someday. We all will. Even if we get raptured, one way or another, we're leaving this earth. And you do not want to run the risk of running into horrible beings like this if you die, when you die, and you're not right with Christ. Imagine what an eternity that would be like. You want to make sure that you're protected, and that your entrance into God's eternal kingdom is secure. So today's the day to get that taken care of. Right now, call out to Jesus if you haven't already, and be spiritually born again in his name. Thank you all. Take care and God bless.
Interesting.
From the true and living God. And what I would like to do today, especially on the day that marks our 249th birthday. Yes, this country on this day, July the 4th, 2025, is 249 years old. I wanted to talk about something that I talk about a lot. I want to read from a passage that I read from a lot, but I want to take a slightly different approach. And yes, what we're going to do is we are going to look at a critical section of the book of Revelation, because this area gives us a glimpse and deep insight into governments of the world and what they look like. And the one thing you have to understand when you look at this particular section of Revelation is you see what is a very vivid picture of what government looks like and the country in which that government resides when their eyes are turned away from God, when their hearts are turned away from God, when their minds are turned away from God. And I want to say this because it's important before we go over this passage, and that is the fact that when a nation has their heart turned towards the Lord, they experience the benefits that come with that. They experience the protection of God. With literally being, we also know based on what the scriptures tell us, specifically in 2 Thessalonians chapter 5, that we as believers act as the preserving influence in this world. And as ominously painful and difficult this world is today, as perilous as the times are in which we live, things have not gotten to the worst place that they possibly can. Why? Because there are Christians still living in this world. There are still Christians living on this earth. But there will come a day when the church of Jesus Christ will be snatched away, when the church will be raptured, and when that rapture happens, there will no longer be a preserving influence living on this earth, holding back true and pure evil from coming into fruition. And yes, don't get me wrong when I say this, we are seeing so much evil right now in this world. We're seeing so much ungodliness. We're seeing so much wickedness. But Christians are keeping that from getting to the point where it is so completely out of control that there is no hope for redemption. But right now, in the moment in which we are living, in the time and in the world in which we live, as ugly and as wicked and as dark as things are, there is an immense amount of hope for redemption. We know that God can take all of the years that the cankerworm destroyed, as it says in the Bible, and restore it to a place where we experience not only newness of life, but we experience a certain newness and refreshment that comes to our country. And that is certainly something that I'm praying for. I'm asking that God would do a work that is akin to the most remarkable spiritual awakening that has ever taken place in this world. And I hope and I pray that it starts here in the United States of America. But I'm just going to say this right now because I think it's really, really important. It's very likely that that might not be the case. And I hope that it will, because I know based on what I don't see in Bible prophecy, based on the fact that the United States of America is not mentioned in Bible prophecy, I think this country becomes inconsequential in the last days. And perhaps the one hope that I have that I'm still holding out for is the reason why the United States of America is inconsequential in Bible prophecy is because there was such a radical spiritual awakening that this country will become inconsequential by virtue of the fact that it was vacated as a result of the rapture. And that's something that I'm praying for. It's something that I'm hoping for. But until that time comes, what's our job as believers? To stand up for righteousness. It's our job to stand against the wicked one. It's our job to stand against evil as we see it being manifested on school campuses, as we see it happening in local governments, in state governments, federal government, as we see all these things. We have to stand out. We have to take a stand concerning these things. And I think it's really important. Now, with all of that said, what we are going to read in Revelation chapter 6, specifically the first 8 verses, is we are going to see a description of what happens when a totalitarian ruler comes into play and what takes place naturally after he is given the power that he has worked so hard to obtain. Now, over the years, we have seen this happen. We have watched totalitarian rulers come in. We have watched them win people's hearts over by the deep-rooted lies that they continue to say, especially preying upon the hopes of a society that is watching nothing but evil taking place around them. They go to these people and they tell them, hey, such wonderful things can happen. Join me in the revolution, and we'll make everything so much better. We'll give you the kind of euphoric feeling that you're hoping for. We'll give you the better life. And never is it based on biblical principles. Never is it based on godliness or righteousness. It's almost always based on some function of secular humanism. As a matter of fact, I will say it's always based on that. And when that begins to happen, the separation that exists between God's relationship with man is always the very thing that fuels the fire of wickedness that takes over. And when that happens, you see things coming in like war, you see economic failure, and of course, you see death. And if you look at what's happened over the last 100 years in this world as a result of things like communism, as a result of things like totalitarian rule, we have seen hundreds of millions of people die as a result, whether it be from wars, that have come from it, whether it be because of the suffering that exists as a result of this ridiculous neo-Malthusian mindset that people have. And folks, when I throw out 200 million, I'm not even talking about the almost 100 million babies that have been killed since the 1970s. If you put that number in, then you're talking about 3, 4, maybe 500 million. You might even be as high as 1 billion if you account all the abortions that have taken place worldwide. So the reality of it is, this is the result.
China's had 300 million, what he just said, abort, yeah.
Of totalitarian.
Got to be careful what you say.
This is the result of people giving into that type of rule and never consulting what the scriptures say. So the funny thing about all of this is, you can go to the scriptures and you can see the patterns repeated. You can look at the scriptures and you can see examples of government all throughout the scriptures. You can see it given to us and you can see what the resounding effects of those government models can be, especially when they are not centered around the things of God, when they're not centered around God at all. And I think that that's something that's really important for us to stop and to contemplate. So we are going to briefly go through this passage in Revelation, and I think it's going to be very eye-opening, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend time just focusing on the pattern, focusing on the very thing that could take away this great country from us today. We could go over so many other aspects of this, but the only thing I'm going to focus on here is the description of how a secular humanist government can come in and destroy every wonderful thing that God has given us. And I think there's nothing more appropriate than on Independence Day here in the United States of America to give you this biblical account, because it's very eye-opening. It's something that is staggeringly important to understand and learn and discern, and it's something that I want you to be able to see and hear and recognize. So let's take a look at this. We're going to jump right into verse 1, and it says this. It's
watch.
Build mat scenes are designed in Melbourne and are handcrafted.
Caring for someone who's been diagnosed with dementia can be overwhelming.
It took me a while to go from being...
It says, and I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard, as it were the noise of thunder, one of the 4 beasts saying, "Come and see." Of course, this is a really important section of the book of Revelation, and perhaps maybe I'll give you a little bit of background here, although I said I was going to kind of avoid some of this, but this is one aspect that you should know. When we get into Revelation chapter 2 and 3, we are talking about the church age. That is a time period in which we are living right now. But when the church gets raptured, we get moved into Revelation chapter 4, and the Bible uses this phrase that's very interesting. It is after these things, which clearly points us to the time that we are post-rapture, and we are beginning to enter into that time period of the tribulation and what eventually many refer to as Jacob's trouble. Now, with all of that said, there is this scene in heaven that we catch wind of. And there in this scene, we see that the title deed to the earth becomes an issue that is found in contention. Remember, when Adam sinned against the Lord, then the title deed that God gave him to the earth was taken away from him. And of course, it was given to Satan, because Satan's possession of that title deed was predicated upon the deception that he, in essence, instilled within the woman, and of course, the rebellion that was instilled within the man. When they rebelled against God, they forfeited every wonderful thing that God had made available to them. As a matter of fact, the only way that man could ever claim that back would be through the finished work of Christ, not only here on this earth, living a perfect life, but of course on the cross and in the resurrection. And so when we receive the Lord in our hearts, it's always because of the fact that we basically have chosen to put our faith and trust in him. That's the simple prerequisite. It's the simple requirement that if you want salvation, if you want to go to heaven, if you want to live in eternal bliss with the Heavenly Father that we oftentimes so read about and we talk about, with Christ, with the power of the Holy Spirit, all of these things, it is a simple act of trust. It's a simple willfulness to say, Lord, I put my faith and trust in you. And then you find that powerful work of salvation that you could never buy, that you could never earn, that you could never bring to yourself. It's a simple act of acceptance. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because there's still the matter of, yes, we've been redeemed by God, but the earth still has not been. The earth has not been taken back. And when we look at this section in the Bible where you are confronted, and this is where we go into chapter 4 and chapter 5 of Revelation, you're confronted with this big question: who is going to be able to loose the seal on this document, on this very specific title deed to the earth? And initially, John thinks that there's nobody that's worthy to open the seal, and he starts weeping bitterly over it, because he realizes that if there's nobody worthy to open the seal, then there is no hope for the future of the world, that there is no hope for anything that's going to happen in the world. And in his mind, at this moment, as we go through Revelation 4 and 5, he feels like all is lost. But something happens spectacular. Something happens that's beautiful. And we see Christ in the heavenly scene come and lay claim to the title deed of the world. And what he does is he starts to open these seals. And what you just read with me in verse 1 is the beginning of those seals being opened. Now, when he opens the first seal, watch this. It is incredible. Because think about this for a second. As the Lord is opening up the seals that are holding down the title deed to the earth, what's being revealed to us is the effect of worldly and secular humanistic government. He opens up the first seal, and it shows us a world of devastation that's coming, because there is humanity that has given itself to rebellion against God, and the Christians that were preserving humanity as it sat in that moment have now been raptured. So what you now have in front of you is something so voraciously difficult, something that is definitely painful, something that can be felt within the inner depths of the world as it exists. And you begin to see the introduction of a very wicked person. Let's look at this. This is the rider of the white horse. Look at this in verse 2. It says, "And I saw, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow, and a crown was given unto him, and he went forth conquering and to conquer." So look at the description. This is a man who clearly has authority, because he was given a crown. So he was given authority. And guess what? He has a bow in his hand, but he doesn't have an arrow. Now, what that speaks of is, it speaks of a totalitarian ruler who gains influence not by duress, not by fear or overpowering or any type of violent takeover. He literally is what seems to be elected into office. He is given that power. By the way, we've seen totalitarian rulers come into fruition this way. We watched Hitler come into fruition this way. He was given every bit of power that he had. There was no violence in the taking of the authority that was necessary in order for him to put into effect what he put into effect. Of course, later he became very violent. But this seems to be a general pattern with humanity. This seems to be a regular thing that we see. And I think every generation, the devil wants to prepare an antichrist that could very well be a candidate for the time that we're reading about right here. Now, the difference here is when a totalitarian ruler comes into play, they bring things at a level that is extreme and brutal. As we're going to find out, they bring in war, and that war brings out economic failure, and that economic failure brings out death. But in this case, it's a much larger scale. So the person that we're reading about here in verse 2, this totalitarian ruler, is the final Antichrist. Now, I want to say this because it's really important. The model that we see given to us is something that has been relived again and again and again and again throughout human history. The difference between this model and all the other models that we've seen in the past is the grand scale of what we're looking at. What we're seeing right here is what may be the most substantial display of the effect of totalitarian rule and its culmination of savagery, its culmination of terrible death and suffering. And it's being described to us right here. Because what happens when a totalitarian ruler comes in this way? Well, he brings in the second seal. He brings in what we see heard here. Look at this. It says, and when he had opened the second seal, I heard the second beast say, come and see. And there went out another horse. Notice this, that was red. So first we had the white horse. That's the Antichrist. Now we have the red horse. So there went out another horse that was red, and power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, and that they should kill one another. And there was given unto him a great sword. Now think about this.
Bev, you're sitting on a monster. Big, isn't it?
Awaken your super.
We made it.
I caboodled it.
You made it with Caboodle.
You said you had a tough conversation today. You want to tell me about that?
Customer experience solutions can be...
This guy comes in. This second seal is opened up. And what happens as a result of the totalitarian ruler that comes in? The totalitarian ruler comes in, he promises peace, he promises everything that everybody could ever want. He's given totalitarian rule, he's given total authority because they think this guy is going to bring in something great. And what does he do? He brings in destruction. He brings to the world what is, in essence, grand theft on a scale that we've never seen. The greatest of all thefts that take place by this rider of this horse is peace. He takes peace away from the world, from the whole world, folks. He introduces war, and not war on a small scale, war on a world scale. The Bible says he takes peace away from the earth, meaning there is no part of the earth that remains peaceful at this point.
Mm-hmm.
That they all will start murdering one another.
Mm-hmm.
Killing one another.
You're doing that already.
That's what totalitarian rulers do. They come in, they take rule, and then they bring into fruition the type of division that creates the incursion of war. And that's what happens when people don't dialogue. When people don't dialogue, there's no free ideas going around. There's nothing like that. There's no element of freedom that even exists. And what do? They resort to violence. That's why free speech is such a critical component of this country in which we live. That's why when the very first birthday took place for the United States of America, in its very inception, were things like this, free speech. So that why? So that we would not revert to violence. What? That's a function of God's heart. That's a function of God's idea. That's a function of God's mentality. Man's mentality says, let's get violent. Let's destroy one another. That's what man's mindset is. That's the secular humanistic approach. People don't see it, people don't think it, but that's exactly what it is. So look what happens next. And when he opened the third seal, I heard the third beast say, come and see. And behold, and lo, a black horse. And he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. Oh, what's this? This is interesting. This speaks of something economic. Verse 6. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, a measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see thou hurt not the oil of the wine. Look what happens as a result of war. And we see this pattern replicatable throughout human history. You end up having, after the totalitarian inflation take place in possible, you see economic ruin develop in ways you never thought it could develop into. And the Bible tells us a very interesting phrase at the end of this. It says, see thou hurt not the oil of the wine. You know what that means? It means there will be a ruling class. It means there will be a ruling class of people that will not be affected because they will continue to function in the lap of luxury while they are used to aid the totalitarian ruler, the beast, the Antichrist, in helping to destroy the world further. The George Soroses of the world, the Clintons of the world, people like that. That's exactly what this is talking about. A ruling class always accompanies this type of nonsense, always accompanies this type of world in which we live.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what happens with totalitarian rule. You eliminate the middle class. You even eliminate much of the upper class. The only class that's left is that of the worst, the lowest of lows, the people that are in the worst condition. the absolute bankrupt poor, and then the filthy rich, who number themselves in the same category as the World Economic Forum. Those who rule, a ruling class that live, again, as I said, in immense luxury at the expense of all that are suffering. That's what the writer of the Black Horse says. And then, of course, the most ominous of the seals are opened here in these first four seals. And it says this in verse 7, and when he had opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth beast say, come and see. Well, this is heavy. Watch this. And I looked, and behold, a pale horse. And his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him, and power was given unto them over the fourth part of the earth to kill with sword, and with hunger, and with the beasts of the earth. We were talking about a person named Death riding this horse. We see hell accompanying him. And what they bring into fruition is the loss of 1/4 of the world's population. Yeah, folks, 1/4. That could be as many as 3 to 4 billion people that will die as a result of this. Remember I mentioned 200 million over the course of the last 150 years? 300 if you count abortions? How about we look at 4 billion, 3 billion? Can you imagine how consequential of a number that is? Look, on a day like today, where those of us that are here in the United States of America are celebrating Independence Day, we have to recognize that our freedom is fundamentally predicated on our willingness to walk in obedience to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. If we continue going the path of not acknowledging the true and living God, if we continue to ignore the voice of God, if we continue to not pay attention to the precepts that God has put in front of us, we are going to walk in bondage. We are going to continue to walk in chains. We live in the freest country in the world, but there's no freedom because of what we've given ourselves to. Folks, we saw a totalitarian ruler come in during the last election. We saw him bring war into fruition. We saw him developing the ruling class while completely destroying every other class. And we watched even the beginning of tremendous death taking place. All the result of the same pattern that is replicatable that we have seen throughout the ages. And what will happen on one final moment, in one final time, one period of time, in the end of the world, we'll see it happen again. But the effects of that will be far more devastating than the totality of all the effects of that we've seen in the past. Here's why I bring this up. We're in a unique position right now.
Okay, I'll finish off with some prophecy with Stan. Where is it? Hang on. Hang on. There it is.
Because I think they got a bunch of people Welcome to the Prophecy Club. Our topic today is New Golden Age of Massive Arrests. First of all, let me just say Happy Independence Day, Happy 4th of July. And something I want to say kind of on a personal note. I know you may be saying, wait a minute, Stan, you're even making a program for Independence Day, 4th of July. I mean, do you ever take off? You know, Bible prophecy is my love, and it's my call. It's not a burden. It's a blessing. And as a matter of fact, you guys are a blessing for listening to me because probably, I mean, here I am 71 and I don't have any plans to retire. I think if I get a little older, and hopefully I will probably still be making these programs. And frankly, I'm going to say something. I think, I've been wrong for a long time, but I think that we are real close to getting the money to drill the well in Israel. I think some really, really, really big changes are on the way, and that's really the point that I'm making today. But first of all, on the happy note, happy Independence Day. I hope you have a wonderful 4th of July, and may America have many, many more of them. Okay, so let me give you some watch points. In other words, these are things I personally am watching for. I believe they're prophecies. So let me cover some of these, because again, I'm trying to give you a long view today, a bird's eye view, not a bug's eye view, of kind of where we are and what's coming. Are we about to see a suspension of the Constitution? I know, I feel like I need to go wash my mouth out with soap saying that, because I love the Constitution as much as you do, and I think it has been one of the greatest blessings that any nation has ever been given. I think God gave us our Constitution. But I also think that the protections that are in the Constitution are protections that the devil uses for his people and has allowed them to infiltrate up into the highest echelons of our nation. And the only way to clean out the barrel is to at least briefly remove the Constitution. I'm afraid to do that, because then you're afraid, well, maybe we'll never get it back again. Next thing is, I think that there's a very, very good possibility martial law is on horizon. I'm going to say this. I do not know that anything is going to happen 4th of July. I do not know specifically anything is going to happen in the month of July. But I see so many things coming. So many things that are on the cliff, and they're they're doing this, they're waving their arms, try to keep from falling off the cliff. There's so many things that could be happening. And I wish God would tell me more if I could tell you, but so frankly, there's a lot of guessing we got to do to try to put the pieces of the puzzle together. God gives us this prophecy, this little piece of the puzzle, but it's a 1,000-piece puzzle, and we're trying to put it all together. Also, I think that the new financial system is very, very close. And I don't have enough real evidence to bring you to prove that. It's just something I kind of just feel in my heart. And a few things that aren't credible enough that have happened that I think is very, very close. And we're going to talk about that. Also, I think that we're probably going to see the Fed Chair Powell terminated, Federal Reserve terminated, IRS terminated, which means no income tax. In my opinion, that would be a very good thing to start rejoicing in the streets. Now, here are some things that if these things were true, we would begin to see some of these. If these things were true, I would think we'd start seeing things like an expansion of places to lock up the prisoners. If there's about to be a massive roundup, and I'm not talking about illegal aliens, I'm talking about bad guys in America, in high places. If that was going to happen, in other words, we're not talking about deporting people. We're talking about locking them up for the rest of their life, maybe even some kind of executions. I don't know. But I would expect to see an expansion of places to lock up prisoners. I don't think it's an accident that they have just, like yesterday, opened up what they call Alligator Alcatraz. I also don't think it's an accident that Trump, I'm going to show you the articles, is opening Alcatraz. Yeah, the one that closed in 1963. The Bureau of Prisons, I'm going to show you, is in the process of reopening it. Why? Because I think they've got a bunch of people that they don't have room in the prisons to lock up. Also, I think the federal chair, Powell, is probably going to be terminated. So if he's terminated, that's huge. That's really big in the financial world. I also think we begin to see perhaps some new military zones on the borders, not to catch the people coming over from Mexico, but to catch the people. See, because when the light turns on and they hear about all their buddies being arrested, then like the cockroaches flee when the light turns on, there's going to be a bunch of people that are afraid they're on the roundup list, and they're probably right. They're going to start trying to flee the nation. They're going to be checking airports, not just the ones where you buy a ticket, but also the charter flights, and also all four corners, north, south, east, and west. And I would expect to see things like new military zones. I'm going to show you that's something new that I'm bringing you today. Also, I would expect to see military tanks and equipment pre-positioned for the takeover. Military National Guard activated. I would expect to see that. I would expect to see the Supreme Court has already pre-approved Trump's authority to use the military and the National Guard, as was happened from the June 14th. Now, let me show you the new stuff. Oh, here, one more thing. I would also expect to see protests in the street. Well, we've already seen that. That's already happened. So, my opinion, if Trump were to call me, I doubt he will, I would say, yeah, I think, not that my opinion counts, but I would say, yeah, I think you have the authority to sign the Insurrection Act of 1807. Also, why was it that Trump was pushing so hard to get his one big, beautiful bill passed and signed on July 4th? Could it be that they have plans for July the 4th or shortly after for a massive arrest? Because once the bill is passed, he's got what he needs. He's got the money, he's got the manpower to do the things that this is the whole point. So could it be that all of these things that the prophets have warned us of that are coming now perhaps are at the door? Let me show you some articles. I got some new information. Oh, okay, a couple more things to remind you. Remember, Demetri was told fall of America starts with an internal revolution. Skipping down to the bottom, remember, Terry Bennett was told that the military will step in and seize control of the federal government. Then Jack Rigney saw an armored battalion of tanks. What happened June 14th? There was an armored battalion of tanks rolling down the streets in Washington, D.C. Now, what if they're still there? Or what if they're maybe just outside the city and ready to roll in at a moment's notice? And he said, he saw military take temporary control of the nation to arrest the evildoers. He said, under certain circumstances, the military can step in, take control of the nation in order to put things back in order, and that's what I saw. And he says that's the way the Constitution would have it done. Could it be? Think about it. July the 4th, Independence Day. That'd be a pretty good day to start all this. And if they were to start hearing massive roundups were taking place, if they were to start hearing that, then could you see that there would be protests, rejoicing in the street, not protests, rejoicing, some will protest. But all right, let me get to the articles. Trump again calls on Fed Powell to resign immediately. He's saying the central bank leader should do so immediately. And he's calling him too late. He should resign immediately. The Fed chair should be investigated by Congress. Okay, so to me, what that's saying is a new financial system. Next article. Trump again presses federal chair Powell to quit. Now, look at the headlines underneath it. Related stories. Trump wrote Powell urging lower rates. He wants interest rate cut to 1%, down from 4.5%, I believe it is. Jordan, to look at call to probe Powell. So, he is putting unbelievable pressure. I think he'd like to see Powell quit, but I also think he's willing to fire him. And my understanding, and I'm not an expert on this, is that he can fire him. 2 or 3 choices to replace Fed Powell's replacement. Fed warns more data before cut. Trump says work to begin on reopening original Alcatraz. Look, This is today, or the day before July 4th when you see this. He's not talking about it. He's doing it. He is opening the original Alcatraz. The article says President Trump announced on Tuesday that his administration is already working on reopening the original Alcatraz in California. He says he had that conceptual work started 6 months ago. What? 6 months ago, before he was even inaugurated, he was planning on reopening Alcatraz. Do you think that that's for illegal aliens? Because I don't. I think that's for illegal bankers and congressmen and senators and people in high places that are bad guys. Conceptual work started 6 months ago on reopening the notorious California prison closed in 1963. Various prison development firms are looking at doing it with us. They're already started. I don't think it's an accident. I can't say that the massive arrests are going to start on July the 4th or even in July. But if you look at what he's doing, it's getting close. Let's go on. The article goes on to say, Trump revealed he'd been inspired to reopen Alcatraz. He said, and what symbol is it? And what will that be? I think it's saying the very worst of the worst. I'm not going to name any names, but you know who I'm talking about. People in high places that have done a lot of damage to our nation. That would be fitting for them to be sent, at least my opinion, that would be fitting. Or perhaps he would think that would be fitting to send him to
I agree.
Ancient Alcatraz built in the 30s. That he was directing his government to reopen and expand Alcatraz to house America's most ruthless and violent offenders. The Rock once housed some of the nation's most notorious criminals, including Al Capone, Machine Gun Kelly. Now, let's go on. President Trump moves forward with a plan to turn Alcatraz back into a federal prison. Yeah, he's serious. He's moving forward with his plan to turn Alcatraz into a federal prison. Officials from the Federal Bureau of Prisons have visited the island last week. We've got engineering teams out there now doing assessments. And they say, I'm really excited to see the opportunity and possibilities. And they say, this is the Bureau of Prisons say, we absolutely think we can get it done. They think they can reopen it. Now, Alcatraz is closed because it was too expensive to maintain. Well, maybe that it's a whole lot cheaper to open that one for some really, really bad people than it is to build a new one. I don't know. But you remember I made a whole program on this. And this is what the left was saying. They believe that massive arrests were going to start April 20th. Now, they didn't start April 20th, or even May, or even June. What about July? Is it coming in July? Let's go back and visit a couple of things. I'm not going to read the whole article. A couple of things I think it's important. Okay, we're going to skip most of it. But they had a conspiracy saying, this is the theory. And I think they have a looking glass. I think they have a time machine. I think they could see it in the future. And they know things that are coming, except they just can't stop them right now. Conspiracy theory is being pushed that the left claims that something really big is going to happen on April 20th. I think it's roundups. The article went on to say that would allow U.S. troops to help secure the border. Oh, no, it's not about securing the border where people are coming into the United States. It's securing the border from people leaving, running, the cockroaches running because the light's been turned on. Many leftists are convinced that President Trump will also use U.S. troops to round up political activists and send them to prisons like in El Salvador, and that may be. But would it be better to go to El Salvador or better to go to Alcatraz? I don't know. Neither one of them would be my choice. The article went on to say, he has officially invoked the Insurrection Act and it will set a larger plan in motion. This article says that if he does sign the Insurrection Act, all of a sudden everything starts happening. Would it be fitting for him to sign that on July the 4th? Well, wait a minute. There's got to be an insurrection for him to sign that. Wasn't that what was June 14th with 1,800 cities in the No King protests? Does he not already have that authority? Did he not already sign it on June 14th? We don't know. Expect an executive order, even the same of the next day, officially declaring the Insurrection Act, restricting freedoms in the name of restoring control of the border, and perhaps in blue state cities. This is the left. This is what the left was saying. They say, here's what you should do: resist. Well, that's the internal revolution. That there'll be a false flag crisis. I don't even think he needs a false flag. I think that he got that June 14th. Then he would declare, this is what they're saying, this is the left, this is what the left says. Declare martial law, militia to assist police, military, mass arrest of opposition leaders. Okay, this is the left saying that there would be massive arrests. The left is saying massive arrests. What do they do with them? Alligator Alcatraz, the original Alcatraz, and maybe El Salvador, or maybe some other places that are going to arrest so many. Look, they got 500,000, that's 500,000 sealed indictments. One sealed indictment does not necessarily equal one person. It certainly does, but one might equal 10, 20, 30, 40, I don't know. It's not limited. Okay, on to the next one. Military National Guard take over major cities, total media control, as in the plan is, the scuttlebutt on the internet says, this here is that they have an 8-hour video showing video proof of all of the corruption that's been going on in high places, and they play that on a repeating basis 3 times a day, 24 hours a day for 10 days at least. That's what the internet says is the plan. Borders closed. Dissidents are trapped inside. I didn't say any of that. That's what the left says. He was planning for June 14th. Didn't happen June 14th. Is it going to happen sometime in July? Is it that what was Trump waiting on his big beautiful bill to get passed for him to start all this? I don't know, but I sure like to know. Let's go on. There's more. Okay. This is the thing about the Insurrection Act of 1807. This is telling you. But the point is, if Trump signs that, first of all, he has to have an insurrection. He's got that June 14th. The left played right into his hands with all of the No King riots, with all of the ICE protests in Los Angeles. They played right into his hand. So all he has to do is sign the Insurrection Act, and now he can use the military against American citizens. Now, I've already covered this. Is way back in April 14th, but I want to update it. I'm going to read the whole thing. U.S. Army to control federal land along the U.S.-Mexico border. This is new. Okay, so what they've done, this article, you can pause and read it if you want to, but the article says that they've got a 60-foot wide, look at the top line, 60-foot wide federal buffer zone that ribbons along the border from New Mexico to California. Now, this is where it is. It's called the Roosevelt Reservation. Here's another way to look at it. What's that for? Oh, well, it's to catch people coming up from from Mexico into America. Or could it be catching the cockroaches running because the light got flipped on and they're trying to get out of being arrested, so they're fleeing down to Mexico? But there's an update to it. Let me finish reading this. Any migrants in the country illegally who are detained by military personnel, did you catch that? See, the military tribunals, these are not civil arrests. These are not arrests by ICE or by police or sheriffs. They're arrested by military. And then they don't take them to civil prisons. They don't try them in civil courts. They take them to military installations behind military bars, and they're tried in military tribunals with 3 judges, and the trials take place like that. And it's done. Any migrants in the country illegally who are detained by military personnel on those lands will be turned over to the local civilian law enforcement agencies. There are about 7,100 active duty troops, Marines, under federal control, currently assigned to the border, about 4,600 National Guard troops under state control. Troops are prohibited from conducting civilian law enforcement on U.S. soil under the Posse Comitatus Act unless President Trump has signed the Insurrection Act of 1807. Then that gives him the authority to use the military to round up bad people, put them in military prisons, try them in military tribunals, and give them military justice, which frankly to me sounds like a pretty good thing. So he goes on to say military purpose doctrine only applies if the law enforcement aspect is incidental. Does this area have a military purpose, or has it nothing to do with enforcing customs and security at the border? My guess is it has nothing to do with catching Mexicans or other people coming up from the south. It has to do with catching the bad people trying to flee. Now, let me go on. There's some other things I want to show you here on this because it's really important. Pentagon has sent a striker brigade. I wasn't in the military, so I don't know what a brigade is, but it sounds pretty big and powerful to me. Striker brigade, more troops to U.S.-Mexico border. And this is back in March. Are they still there? 3,000 more active duty troops to U.S.-Mexico. My guess is they're still there. Now, here's the new stuff, I promise you. If you look at the date, this is July the 2nd. Military zone established in Arizona on the military corps. They've added more troops, more of the military. So
why do they need all these troops?
Wide area, all now they've expanded that. It doesn't tell us, and I looked, I couldn't find any kind of a map, but it says this week a fourth defensive zone along the U.S. border with Mexico. Human National Defense Area is now 140-mile extension of the Marine Corps Air Station Marines. Did you catch that? It says similar defense areas already exist in Texas and Mexico will continue to enhance the department's ability to protect the southern border from unlawful entry or exit. That's what they're there for. They're not to try to catch the people coming up from the south. They're there to catch the cockroaches because Trump turned on the light and they're running for their lives because they know they have the hand of the cookie jar. Trump calls for deporting some citizens to El Salvador. Now, if you look at the date on this, this is back on April 15th. But that's got to be part of the plan. He's got to have somebody put, look, if he's going to try to arrest 500,000 people, or maybe more, you got to have some place to put them. Remember this one? This is back on April 15th, too. Trump admin ways deporting citizens to foreign prisons. Maybe it's not just El Salvador. So, I mean, what's he doing? This guy here is supposed to be very credible. If you'll read in the middle, military tribunals are coming. Those found guilty going to be, I don't even want to say the word. Well, yes, I do want to say it. And I do want to see it. But I better not say it. Okay, so you got to read it. Okay. This is the executive order. This is what started it all. December 20th, 2017, blocking the property, not just blocking it, confiscating it, of persons involved in serious human rights abuse or corruption. All of this is the executive order that gives him the authority to do this. And this is the 484,000 sealed indictments, but that now is up to about 500,000. And I've covered this before, but I want to remind you, 11/11/2019, Trump was getting off the helicopter. I think in light of all these things, this is what he said to the reporters. I think in light of all the things going on, you know what I mean by that, the fake news, the comings of the world, all the bad things that went on, it's called a swamp. I caught them. I caught them all. Let's see what happens. Nobody else could have done that but me. I caught all of this corruption that's going on, and nobody else could have done it. Was he kidding? Well, maybe he was. But if he was kidding, he'd only said it once. But he didn't just say it once. 9/7/24. He says, all of this cheating, lying, thieving, hoaxing, plotting will come to an end. It's going to come to an end. And he says, we're going to cash out the corrupt political class. We're going to restore a republic. And we're going to drain the swamp. And we're going to do it once and for all. We're going to get it done. That's twice. Oh, here's another one. And he says, a massive fraud of this type of magnitude allows for the termination of all rules, regulations, and articles, even those found in the Constitution. What did that just say? What did that just say? That just says he's willing to suspend the Constitution, and that's probably what he'll have to do to take all of the rights and the freedoms away, to round up the bad guys and girls. Here's saying it again. This is the fourth time. He's interviewed here. They're going to be held accountable. This is what he says. I'm running out of time. Here's another time. When we win, and we will, those people who cheated be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which include long-term sentences and depravity of justice does not happen again. So I've run out of time, but here's the question. Are we about to see massive arrests?
Maybe. Okay, guys. See you tomorrow. Good night, Di.
Happy 4th of July. Happy Independence Day.